Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reject Modernity, Embrace Tradition, where we take you back to the good old days, just maybe not exactly how you think by our title. My name is Megan Cox.
And I am Clayton Becker.
And Clayton, we've discussed that we've been tackling some heavier topics lately. Yeah. So to lighten things up a little bit, what are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah, we felt that we'd been hitting on some real stinkers, frankly, like real sad shit recently. So today, in honor of the World Cup, we're releasing this one a little bit late, not for any other reason than we wanted to time it as close to the first game as possible. Definitely nothing to do with Megan or I being sick last week. Today, we are rejecting the closed league and embracing the beautiful game. And what that means, essentially, long story short, is the way that the United States does things with regards to soccer, and we're going to call it soccer throughout the episode just because we don't want to confuse people. Normally when I'm talking with my European friends, I will call it football, but we're going to call it soccer throughout the episode just for the sake of clarity. The United States does soccer weird, including calling it soccer, one might argue. But anyway, with the World Cup kicking off later this week, and with the last couple of episodes we've had being, well, like dark as hell, we figured let's do an episode with a little bit more whimsy, a little bit more levity on the world's most popular sport, what we get wrong about it here in the United States, and how to embrace the way that the beautiful game is played around the world. Now, of course, there are a number of things we could talk about here because the United States does do soccer super fucking weird, but we're going to focus on two areas in particular here. First, the structure of the United States, or really, I guess, sort of like United States and Canada's domestic league, Major League Soccer, and then the way that the United States handles player development. Now, before we go into that, though, we want to talk about like why this is something we're discussing with regards to soccer and like why it's a hang up for the United States in soccer compared to player development and league structure in the other popular sports in the United States, which handle player development and league structure basically the same way, but where the United States doesn't have the same kind of like repeated failures on the world stage. We're going to ignore American football because we're the only people that fucking do that. But when it comes to other big sports that lots of people around the world do play, the United States still does very well at things like hockey, baseball, and basketball, despite the fact that the player development problems we have in soccer are really also present in baseball, hockey, and basketball. So to a greater or lesser extent.
Yeah, I would argue that you see this less in hockey, but yes, I think it's true that our player development issues and our league structure issues show up in other sports, but definitely in soccer more so than the other sports.
And I think, it's important to understand that, like, one, the like basketball and baseball and hockey are popular sports around the world. But there's like a gradient there, right? Like I would argue like baseball is very popular in Latin America and East Asia. Basketball is getting more popular around the world, but still not on the level of, a soccer or even, like a cricket sort of sport where the most populous country in the world that's their main sport that they play, right? And they're fucking good at it, right? Mm-hmm. And then hockey, of course, very popular among places that have ice, less popular among places that don't have ice. And I would argue that sort of gradient of like where these sports are popular relative to their popularity in the United States maps on really well to how good the United States is at those sports relative to the rest of the world, right? We're still really good at baseball, although, we haven't won a World Baseball Classic in a little while, I'm pretty sure. I don't know who won it this last year. I don't think it was us, right?
Yeah, I don't, despite the fact that we watched it, I don't remember.
And then, the time before that, it was Japan, right? And, other places around the world do produce really high caliber athletes for baseball. I mean, arguably the two best players in baseball right now are Dominican and Japanese. That's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Shohei Ohtani, right? Arguably the two best baseball players in the MLB right now.
I think Canadian at this point.
I mean, like, you could call him Canadian, I guess, if you really want to.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, whatever. Fair enough, right? But like arguably the best baseball player right now, arguably like maybe the best baseball player ever. We'll see how things continue. Is someone from Japan. It's Shohei Ohtani, right? There's nothing like inherent about the way that the United States like does baseball player development that means we always produce better baseball players. Similarly, arguably the best player in today's NBA is from France, right? And the other ones who are right behind him,
Greece?
from Greece, right? Giannis. And wherever the fuck the guy from Denver is from, whose name is escaping me at the moment, plays in Denver.
Yeah, former Yugoslav.
Jokic, there we go.
Yeah.
Serbia? Is he from Serbia? I think.
I don't want to say the wrong one.
And then also there's Luka Doncic, who I believe is from the same place, Croatia, Serbia. Well, yes, one of the former Yugoslav states. Arguably, like the four best players in the NBA right now are not from the United States, right? Which should just go to show you, right, that like the way that we're doing player development, even in these other leagues, is not like perfect, right? And you know, the United States has never, like, really, I would argue, has never really been like the perennial above all others powerhouse in hockey, right? Like, we do well, but like not
a lot of our ability to do well is now at this point predicated on the fact that everybody wants to play in the NHL.
Yeah.
So that's why things like the Olympics and the Four Nations Face-Off are so popular. The World Cup of Hockey less so. But yeah, we're getting people from other countries into our North American League, and that's why it's important. But to tie all of this up, because it feels like we're really previewing our arguments before we've gotten into them, all of these problems are significantly exacerbated. They show up in their worst ways in how the U.S. does professional soccer.
Yeah, they are amplified to like the nth degree, whatever order of magnitude, when it comes to professional soccer. So let's start first with the way that MLS's structure is weird compared to global soccer leagues. This is going to sound like, why is this structure weird if you're not a global soccer fan? But this is sort of the way that MLS is structured, right? So first, and the most insane relative to global leagues, but like the clearest like thing that just happens here in the United States, is that MLS teams aren't actually separate entities, like sort of legally speaking, right? MLS has what's called a single entity structure, where the individual clubs are just franchises and the team owners are just investors in the league, with like the right to quote unquote buy and sell that team, make decisions for that team, act as though they own the team, even though like legally speaking, like not quite, right? Like there's still things that you have to get permission for from like the board of the league, from other owners in order to do, right? That kind of stuff. This is how leagues typically operate in the United States, right? The like NBA has a similar franchise model. The MLB has a similar franchise model. I don't know if hockey actually does.
I don't actually know this in terms of revenue
share. The
NFL
also has this sort of similar franchise model.
So when you say franchise model, it's like McDonald's.
Yeah, sort of, a little bit.
You know, you don't own individually necessarily the branding or the shield or any of that. You are franchising it from the central league authority.
Yeah. I'm like, this is why teams move around so much in the United States, right? Because they're like just like this doesn't really happen in other leagues around the world. Like you don't really get like
the Baltimore Colts don't become the Indianapolis Colts. The Raiders don't move from Oakland to Las Vegas.
Like the one time that this has happened in like recent memory that I am aware of in the UK, for example, Wimbledon FC moved to Milton Keynes. Everybody fucking hated it. They renamed the team Milton Keynes Dons, like the Dons, the Wimbledons. Everyone hated it. They now play in either the third or the fourth tier, and like it just doesn't work. Like their plan was that they were gonna like have it become this super team where the people of Milton Keynes would support this team and the people from Wimbledon would still support the team. Didn't happen. The fans of Wimbledon FC founded what's called a Phoenix Club. It's Wimbledon AFC, from John Green fame, right? They now play also in basically the same league. I think the same league as the MK Dons team does. And they're like fan owned. They've like risen through the ranks of British soccer, English soccer. Anyway, we're previewing a bit here of how that can happen. But the long story short is that this single entity franchise model is totally foreign to how soccer leagues operate around the world. And the distinction is not like merely cosmetic, right? It actually has like pretty important implications for the structure of things like player contracts, TV rights, sponsorship deals, other forms of commercial revenue, and like the amount of money that actually sees the pitch, which we mean like investments that actually go into the team relative to the league's revenues overall.
Yeah, I didn't know this, and it's blowing my mind because I'm thinking through the implications. And like, we're on paragraph 1, and I'm like, well, it's kind of nuts. No, I mean, just like negotiating for TV rights. Like, are individual clubs negotiating broadcasting rights?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like there's, like league-wide rights in all of these leagues as well, and they distribute funds according to league position. But like individual clubs can negotiate a lot of these kinds of things. It just absolutely doesn't happen here in the United States.
Nope.
There's also a bunch of other sort of like sponsorship regimes, right? Like every club in the United Kingdom, for example, negotiates their own kit makers, so the jersey makers, right? Whether that's going to be like Adidas or Under Armour or Nike or whoever, right? Umbro. There's a bunch of these, right? But like every single one of the NFL's uniforms are made by the same people, right? So like this is important implications for like commercial revenue and like how the sport actually works, right? Mm-hmm. Some of these things aren't exactly the same across leagues, but like the broad point, right, is that in Europe and in other global soccer leagues, the clubs are individual businesses that manage all or at least most of these things, in some coordination with the league structure. Whereas in the United States, there is this single entity model where like the league has a lot more power than like the individual clubs do, vis-a-vis each other in global leagues. Perhaps the clearest manifestation of this is that you can't like just decide to start a soccer team in the United States that then eventually might have the chance of competing in the top tier of the American soccer league structure.
This is really interesting to me, not because of the concept of promotion relegation, which we're going to talk about, but before MLS was really starting, you absolutely could do that. I went to Timbers games before they were in MLS. They were just out there playing games against other teams.
I think the important thing to understand here, and this is like, Megan is talking about the Portland Timbers. They're one of the MLS clubs with like the longest professional history. They were founded back in like the
1970s. My mom remembers going to Timbers matches in the 70s.
But the current Portland Timbers club is a legally distinct organization from the one that was founded back in the 1970s. Like they maintain all of that like club history, obviously, right? But they're no longer an independent business. They're a franchise of Major League Soccer, right? And they had to pay an expansion fee to get added as a club in Major League Soccer, right? So this is how this works in the United States. You like put together an ownership group. You either have a club already that's playing in a different league, or you're creating one from scratch, right? You have to pay an expansion fee to be an MLS club. The way that this works in most global soccer leagues is that you can just found a soccer team, or you can purchase one with the intent of moving that club up the league system. Right? This is something that is normal, even like somewhat common in European leagues, especially, but simply just like cannot happen here in the United States.
And an expansion is a massive deal here. I mean, I think two of the most recent. I don't think we've added. I don't think we've added basketball teams or NFL teams all that recently. They move around, but you don't usually get new ones. There have been 2 new hockey teams in the last 10 years or so, the Vegas Golden Knights and the Seattle Kraken. And for each, you had to do an expansion draft, which gets super weird. So the idea of just adding a team in an established league because you don't have a process for doing it. It's kind of mind blowing that you could just get a bunch of guys together and be like, all right, we're doing it.
Yeah. And so, I'm not going to argue that this is the reason for this, but one of the reasons perhaps behind why our eccentric rich people who have nothing better to do with their time and their money don't spend money on soccer is because they, can't just start a soccer team or buy one and then, have the idea of moving it up through various leagues, which means that they just have to spend money on their dumb super yachts to feed their egos rather than buying sports teams in order to do so.
I don't know. There's a lot of eccentric rich owners in the established league system.
Yeah, but they can't buy a team that is.
They have to buy a team that already exists. They can't just create a new one.
They can't create a new one. They can't buy one that's in the lower leagues and move that team up to the higher leagues.
Fair enough.
So we talked about expansion, but we want to talk a little bit I guess, about promotion and relegation here, which is common in soccer leagues around the world. Again, does not happen in the United States.
In any sport in the United States, this does not happen.
Yeah. Instead, right, MLS has grown through these expansions, right? There are now 30 teams in MLS, up from, I think, just 16 when I started paying attention to soccer as a young kid. The early days of MLS were not very good for the league. There were teams folded, stuff. There was bad stuff going on. Wasn't sure that the league would survive commercially, and so I can understand why they wouldn't have wanted to, introduce something like promotion and relegation back then when they were just starting a professional soccer league, a top tier professional soccer league. But now the expansion fee for the most recent team that joined the league, San Diego FC, who joined in the 2025 season, was $500 million. That money isn't going to see the pitch, as we say it. It's not actually money that's invested in the team itself. It's the expansion fee that they paid to the league to be allowed in, right? It's not being spent on San Diego's stadium or youth development or player contracts. In fact, San Diego FC doesn't even have its own stadium. They play in Snapdragon Stadium, which is shared with the San Diego State University's American football team, who San Diego...
Go Aztecs!
Go shared with that football team. They sit behind that football team in terms of scheduling priority. They do not receive 100% of the match day revenue or ticket sales from the games that they play in that stadium. And they only receive a portion of the revenue from the stadium naming rights, which were valued at $45 million or roughly $3 million a year for the 15-year deal. They likewise have no rights to negotiate the rights to the next stadium naming deal, which could well be worth more if the team continues to do well, perform well. And as of right now, there are actually no plans for San Diego FC to build their own stadium, at least in part due to the fact that they had to pay $500 million merely for the right to have a seat at the table to play in the league. This brings us to promotion and relegation. The second, very weird thing about MLS is that there is no promotion and relegation, which just further reduces the opportunities and incentives for investment in the game.
I'm sure this is coming up, but can we explain what promotion and relegation are?
Yes. So the very next sentence in the notes is, now what promotion and relegation means is that rather than there just being one league, which we have mostly in the United States, right? Or sort of parallel leagues, right? Where you might think, oh, well, they've got the NFL and that's the top, right? But then you also have the Arena Football League and you have the XFL and other competitions out there. They're considered junior competitions, right? But they're sort of parallel, quote unquote.
Yeah,
right?
that's not... Yeah.
Rather than having just the one league or having parallel leagues are arranged in a pyramid structure where you have the top elite teams at the very top top elite teams at the very top of the pyramid, right? That's like the Premier League, that's the French Ligue 1, that's the Spanish La Liga, that's the Italian Serie A, the German Bundesliga, what have you, right? That's the top league. And then underneath that, you have various like subsidiary leagues, but within the same league system, right? And so the best and the worst teams in each of those respective leagues move between them at the end of the season. So in England, for example.
Yeah, go ahead.
In England, for example, perhaps like the most known league system around the world, the bottom 3 teams in the highest league, which is called the Premier League, get relegated to the second tier, which is annoyingly called the Championship. Don't ask me why they decided to name it that. That's what it's named. And then the top 3 teams from the Championship move up to the Premier League. Though technically it's not exactly the top 3, it's the top 2, and then there's a playoff between teams 3 through 6 for the third spot, but like whatever.
That's actually super fun. Yeah. I love that. That's some real wild card stuff. I like that a lot.
It's like there are 3 spots, right? And the 3 best teams, the top 2 and then the playoff winners, move up into the Premier League, right? This incentivizes things like financial investment in the sport, people trying to build teams, people trying to improve youth development, because every single team has a chance to make it into the higher leagues. And those higher leagues have more commercial revenue, more eyes on them, more fan draw, bigger match day revenues, bigger ticket sales, right? And the research we have on this, because people have actually researched the economic implications of promotion and relegation, suggests that promotion is more beneficial than relegation is detrimental. In other words, like you get more money going up than you lose going down, which like helpfully creates this like positive sum investment structure, right? Where like you can expect to make money by moving up through the leagues rather than being out your investment if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. And I mean, if anybody's having a hard time tracking with this, because it blew my mind the first time I heard about it, it's as if at the end of the football season, the Cleveland Browns and the Ohio State University football team trade spots, and the Cleveland Browns play in the NCAA and the Ohio State University football team plays in the NFL.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, right? It is actually kind of like that.
Yeah, basically.
I think a story that like illustrates this well, and like that an American audience should at least sort of be familiar with, even though it's like a little bit overdone perhaps at this point, is actually the story of Wrexham, which was purchased by Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds back in 2021. 2022, one of those 2 years. They purchased this team who, despite being in Wales, the English Football League system is complicated. Don't ask me to explain it anymore. They play in the English League system. Kind of become a meme, but it's genuinely instructive. Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney bought this team, bought Wrexham, while the team was in the 5th division of English football. They'd been stuck there for years. It was like a whole thing where they used to be in higher divisions. They'd fallen on hard times. They've been relegated to the 5th division, which is what the English call non-league football, because the football league is just the top 4 divisions. And you're going to love the naming conventions here. You got the Premier League, the Championship. The 3rd division is called League 1, and the 4th division is called League 2. Again, really not helpful in terms of helping people situate where they actually are. Wrexham were in the level below that, which the 5th tier is called the National League. So anyway, unhelpful naming conventions aside, they'd been stuck there for years. In the 6 years that they've owned the team, they've taken them from the 5th tier to the 2nd tier, and in the most recent season, they finished 7th in the Championship. Remember, Championship to the 2nd tier. Just barely missing out on the final playoff spot to be promoted to the Premier League for the first time in their history. 2 of our very own North American eccentric rich people went and bought a club in the 7th largest city in Wales, bent on taking them up through the English league system into the Premier League, because that kind of thing simply is not possible here. They should be fucking buying a team or starting a team in like fucking Allentown. Like, they should be starting a team in Allentown, Pennsylvania, like just outside of Philadelphia, where Rob McElhenney is from, like banking on the It's Always Sunny.
I thought Allentown was a real random pull, but okay, now that makes sense.
Like picking somewhere, like banking on the Philadelphia connection that he's got there, right? Like leading that team up through the English league system, like through the American league system, rather than like buying a team in Wales, right? I think another example of this, maybe not example, but just a thing people should have heard about, the way that I think that people around the world view our lack of promotion and relegation is highlighted by a scene in the first season of Ted Lasso. Everyone is remarking on promotion and relegation, the fact that the US doesn't have it, and one of the Richmond players, Isaac, says, "Wait, so what happens to the shit teams at the end of the season?" And Ted goes, "Well, they play out the rest of the schedule, going through the motions and meaningless games contested in laughless, half-empty stadiums, and everyone's pretty much fine with that." But we don't have to be fine with that. We don't.
I would even argue that that's not quite what happens necessarily in plenty of leagues where your draft position is based on how badly you do. There's an incentive.
There's an incentive to be worse. Yeah, tanking is a huge problem in American sports, right?
Yes.
And a lot of leagues have tried to address it, right? By making it where you end up in the draft a little less deterministic, right? Based on league position.
It's like a literal lottery, like the balls in a bingo cage, component to it, and the Maple Leafs won. But it does somewhat depend on how poorly you've done. But the Florida Panthers were sitting, it felt like half their roster in the last couple of weeks of the season because they're injured, which everybody's injured. But also, well, if we sit our star players, then maybe we'll do worse and we'll get a better draft position.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah, sorry to the audience for that one. Had a real sneeze sneak up on me there. We don't have to be content with tanking and teams just sort of playing out games in half empty, lifeless stadiums, right? We have the ability to be better. And one of the ways that we can be better is by instituting promotion and relegation. Teams have every incentive to do as well as they can for the entire season. And it also just adds some degree of meaning to the end of the season for teams that are close to the bottom or close to the top in the other leagues, right? There's a world of a difference, I promise you, between what position in the draft are we going to get and are we going to be relegated to another division, right? It adds another degree of meaning to the sport. Speaking of Ted Lasso, though, the other main thing that the United States does wrong is regarding player development, which is just where Ted excels, I think. He helps those fellas be
That's the segue. Okay.
On and off the pitch. Okay. So there are a couple of problems here. The first is that American sports generally, but soccer in particular, rely on what we call pay to play, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. While it is the case that all 30 MLS clubs have their own youth academies, which are free for the members, for the students, right? The academy prospects. Most of the players that are good enough to do more than be in your sort of community rec league aren't going to one of those 30 academies, right? Most of the players that are good enough to be identified at a young age play club soccer in what are called MLS Next elite academies, which are much more geographically dispersed. There are lots of them. They often feed into these MLS academies, right? But are totally not free.
Insanely expensive.
Right? Very expensive.
Any club sport in America at this point is insanely expensive. There is no cheap sport.
Yeah. And this pay to play, these MLS Next elite academies can cost anywhere from just a few $1,000s a year to well over $10,000 a year, depending on the part of the country you're in, how expensive things are generally, right? it's more expensive in a place like California or New York than it is in a place like Lawrence, Kansas, for example, right?
You're thinking of Lawrence, Kansas because of the Algerian national team?
Hell yeah, absolutely
Yes.
I am. I saw that interview with that guy who was like, we don't know much about Algeria. We just know they're on the Mediterranean and they got their independence from France, and the southern part of it is like in the Sahara Desert. And I was like, man, that guy knows more about Algeria than any other person in Kansas. But anyway,
well, at the moment the Algerians are in Kansas, so I imagine they know
anyway, this pay to play is important because like raw athleticism is only going to get you so far in soccer. It's like a very technical, highly tactical sport, right? You have to develop those skills starting relatively young if you are going to be able to compete at the highest level. Like I was telling Megan before we started recording that, like, you know, while most sports in the United States, I would argue, you like go from like high school to college and then college to the pros. It's really rare these days that someone goes directly from high school to the pros. It's even banned in certain leagues, right? But
you need 2 years minimum or 1 year minimum to go into football.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and I think basketball at this point. Hockey's a little different. There are a lot of like high school age kids who will go play hockey someplace. They're still going to school at the time, but they are playing on perhaps a WHL team, Western Hockey League, Ontario Hockey League, etc. So there are some teams that are like not necessarily farm teams, but training young people at kind of the high school age. But to your point, yeah, sports are really inextricably tied to kind of high school and college in the United States.
At like the level that soccer is played around the world, if you are playing in college as opposed to being a player at a professional club, you are like basically not going to go pro. Right? Like there was a debate on Twitter a few months ago of like, what's the biggest gap between college and the pros? And the answer is soccer. Because if you are a college level athlete in soccer, like if you are playing soccer in college, with very rare exceptions, you are not of the caliber that is going to make the pros.
You know what I think is, it's interesting that you bring that up because college baseball, the College Baseball World Series, March Madness for basketball, obviously the college football playoffs are a massive deal. You could even say in certain places the Frozen Four is a big deal. You don't get them with soccer at all. And I wonder if it's just because the quality is so not there.
It's
relative
possible.
to
it's possible. I mean, I think it's partly that the quality is just not there, and partly just that, like, you know, soccer has just never been as popular as those other sports in the United States, so we never had the opportunity to like develop a media ecosystem around them. But the reason that I bring this up is because, you know, with fees that high in our pay-to-play system, you are missing out on a ton of talented kids who would be able potentially to develop into good or even great players with proper coaching and training, but who never do just because they cannot afford to be part of the academies that offer that level of preparation, and they aren't lucky enough to be identified by one of the 30 MLS clubs that have their own youth academies.
And it's really unfortunate because the pitch to that I've always heard about why soccer is the global game is it is the most accessible game. It requires almost no equipment.
Yeah, it requires a ball and a somewhat open area, right? You can make goals out of anything, right? Mm-hmm. Perhaps the only sport which we could consider more accessible is like just straight up running, right?
Yeah,
which requires like nothing, basically.
Yeah.
Requires a pair of shoes, right?
Not even necessarily. You see,
not even necessarily. Yeah, absolutely. Right. There's like every Olympics, there's like some marathoner who loses his shoes or something and finishes the race barefoot. Right. But anyway, these kinds of pay-to-play academies do not really exist in Europe and other like successful soccer nations. For one, there are just way more professional clubs than there are in the United States. For example, in just those top 4 divisions that we talked about in English soccer, just the Football League, there are 92 teams. And there are more teams in the lower divisions. And basically every one of them, at least up to a point, right? Like maybe the 5th tier, the 6th tier, right? Has their own youth academy, which is free to the players and their families. And also recall here that the UK's population is a lot smaller than the United States population. We've got basically 30 free academies with a population of roughly 330 million people or so, right? The UK has at least, like 100 plus of these free academies, right? With a population of like 65 million. So they've got like more than 3 times the number of academies with a population that's like about 1/5 to 1/4 the size of ours, right? Like that's sort of the level that we're dealing with here. As they would say in Britain, there's levels to this game. There's levels to this shit, bruv. Anyway, yeah, Megan, take your hands away from your face. There's levels to the game, man.
Okay. Our audience couldn't have seen. I mean, I guess they could. The 5 people who watch us on YouTube, but
no. Our YouTube audience is huge, massive, enormous. They could hear the hands being in front of your face.
Oh my god, that's
Megan
funny.
just doesn't like my impression. That's okay. Whatever. I'll get over it.
Yeah.
Additionally, in many nations, the national federations play an active role in developing players. In Germany, don't worry, I'm not going to do a German accent.
That could dip into some dangerous territory really easily.
The National Federation runs its own network of like coaching centers, right? Development and coaching centers. The German Footballing Federation runs more than 360 regional centers around the country at the expense of roughly 10 million euros a year, which are staffed by more than 1,200 coaches, each of which holds at least what's called a UEFA B license. UEFA stands for the Union of European Football Associations. That's just how it's pronounced, UEFA. And the UEFA B license is a course. Basically, it trains and allows coaches to be the head coaches of amateur clubs, youth teams up to the age of 16, or assistant coaches at a professional club. This is sort of roughly where like youth development coaching begins, right? Like serious coaching begins. So having coaches who are trained to do that work is really, really important.
Not just somebody's dad who's really going to screw up your ligaments or whatever.
Dad, right? No, it's not like someone's like dad who works in real estate who's like doing the team because their kid wanted to play soccer and the league needed volunteers. It's like professional people who are like really up on their shit, right? And this is the second thing that the United States does bad, which is that we just like don't have the kind of like deep bench of coaches who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And a big part of that.
Just generally, I want to think about like this from kind of a soft power perspective because we're political scientists. This is good advertisement for many countries, and I guess the U.S. doesn't feel like it needs to do any of this, which may completely be true. But to the extent that you're like, oh yeah, the Czech national team, they're great or something. I really like XYZ. Oh, the Dutch are so much fun when they come and they do their cheers and they jump this way. Like whatever. That just, it's a soft power thing and we don't feel the need to invest in it, or we don't feel like it's an appropriate national investment. The Red Army Sports Club in the Soviet Union, all of these people were in the military and they were competing in sports to kind of like influence national policy or influence global policy in that way. The French ski team are all in the French army. Like this is a source of spending. You are smiling at me. Am I inadvertently segueing you?
No, you've made this way more serious than the episode needed to be.
Sorry, I'm messing with your lighthearted episode.
Power dynamics of international sports washing.
Okay, whatever. But like, it's relevant. It's relevant. Just like South Korean music is an important export for South Korea. Sports, like the idea of having a minister for sport. Can you imagine having a cabinet secretary in charge of sports? Like,
yeah, I can, Megan. You're segueing me into the second half of the episode here.
All right, stick a pin in that. We'll be right back.
We'll stick a pin in that.
Yeah, we got to talk about more stuff first.
We do have to but this is relevant, right? This is a soft power thing. It, I think, is very like you can draw like pretty clear through line to like the United States not valuing this, to the Trump administration just like totally fucking up the World Cup as a sports washing opportunity. Like the last two World Cups were in
sports washing, to be clear, not sports watching.
Yes,
sports
washing. WASHING, right? It's like when you use a global sports tournament to burnish your image as an authoritarian regime, right?
No authoritarian regimes have done that recently that we know of. It's fine.
No, definitely not. It's not like the last two World Cups were in Russia and Qatar. But anyway, the Trump administration is just like completely fucking up the opportunity that they have to like sports wash their bullshit. It's just like how you manage to like have your World Cup here in the United States be worse PR than Qatar literally killing
everybody.
Like killing thousands of migrant workers during the construction of their stadiums. Like it takes a special amount of skill to fuck up such an obvious sports washing opportunity. But anyway, enough with the heavy stuff. This is a fun episode, Megan. This is an episode where we don't talk about the problems. I feel like
we're just not fun people, basically.
I felt like
this might be about us.
I was doing accents. I was remembering interviews. I was like having a great time talking about my favorite sport.
And then I made it about soft power and migrant death. Okay, yeah, fair enough.
All right. So, focus up. The United States does coaching badly, at least in part because it is really, really expensive to get coaching licenses here, much like it is expensive to do the whole pay-to-play soccer. According to UEFA, remember that like broad European body, right? The Union of European Football Associations, there are approximately 28,400 coaches in Germany who hold at least a UEFA B license. The equivalent in the United States, the USSF B license, so the United States Soccer Federation B license, has only approximately 5,500 people who have completed it. For the folks who aren't doing the math at home, Germany has more than 5 times the number of B qualified coaches as the United States, while having a population, once again, that is only about 1/4 the size of ours. Now, part of this obviously is just due to having lower demand for coaches, right? Something that could be remedied at least in part if the United States were to do some of its own regional player development, like if the USSF were to run these kind of regional development centers like the German Federation does. But another part of it is down to the fact that coaching licenses and the courses that you're required to take to get them are quite expensive in the United States compared to other countries. We've got pay-to-play coaching as well as pay-to-play pay. There we go. It worked out, sort of.
Play to pay.
Pay. Bleh.
Pay
to coach play. As well as pay to play. There we go. The USSF B license costs $3,000 on top of the costs of getting the prior licenses, the D and the C license, which you need to have in order to get the B license. You have to work your way up, right? You have to start as someone's real estate dad who's coaching in the community league, right? Get that D license, right? And work your way up through it, right? But like, no one's real estate dad is spending $3,000 to get a B license, right? And so there's just like a point at which the pipeline of potential coaches, like, because it's not a particularly highly compensated position, because there's like other things in the United States.
It's volunteer.
Yeah, right. Well, like there are, like people that have the 5,500 people that have a B license are probably getting paid for it.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, if you're the head coach at a high school or something, you're getting paid.
Yeah. But the number of people that we have that kind of like, high level coaching qualification is pretty low, right? Relative to other countries, right? This results in like 2 separate facets of bad player development in that the United States largely has players who get inferior coaching while simultaneously having to pay substantial amounts of money to play in the highest quality academies, which also differ from top quality European academies in other ways just because of the costs, right? First, the pay-to-play club model demands year-round commitment, right, to justify its cost. If a family's paying $3,000 to $5,000 to $10,000 a year for a club, that club needs to offer year-round programming to justify that fee, and parents feel they need to commit to fully getting their money's worth to that full year-round schedule. Early specialization thus follows like directly from that financial logic, right? And not from any sort of actual development rationale, right? Where young players in these European academies, like I'm talking, like young kids and like preteens, right? Like the level where you're sort of like getting identified as a potential prospect for the future. You're not having this kind of like year-round travel across to a whole bunch of other states and all that kind of stuff, right? Like you're not specializing into different positions and all that kind of thing. Like you're trying out different stuff, right? Because from like a development perspective, like a sports development perspective, that kind of early specialization doesn't actually make much sense, right? It doesn't actually produce well-rounded athletes. Second, that year-round nature of those academies pulls kids out of other sports that they might be playing. That sort of multi-sport sampling approach that other athletes and other sports in the United States do, that the developmental research says develops skills otherwise. The US historically has had that kind of multi-sport youth culture, which is one of the reasons why we're so good at the Olympics, for example.
The classic 3-sport athlete.
Yeah, classic, right? You like play one sport in the fall, one sport in the winter, one sport in the spring, right? For me, like I rarely played 3 sports all year, but I played soccer in the fall and I played baseball in the spring, right? I was no good at basketball, and so I didn't do basketball, right? But up through like early into high school, basically, I was playing soccer and one other sport, right? The year-round club model totally erodes the benefit that you get of being a multi-sport athlete without the benefits of like a truly professionalized free development academy. So in other words, like the long story short here is that American kids lose multi-sport diversification earlier than the research suggests is like proper for like when you decide which sport you're going to make a move in, right? Without getting compensating benefits of a professional academy environment. In essence, the US like basically gets the worst of both worlds. They don't get the free, professional, high quality, early specialization of a European academy, and they don't get the multi-sport sampling that produces well-rounded athletes. Just expensive, year-round club soccer with variable coaching quality that costs so much money. So now that I've held forth at you for 45 minutes about the problems of American sport, American soccer, we'll take a bit of a break. We'll come back. I'll explain some of the things that I think we could do to reject this closed system and embrace the beautiful game.
Welcome back. When we left you, we were realizing that the United States does everything bad, strange, and wrong in terms of its soccer league and soccer development. So let's come up with some ways we can do it better, Clayton.
Yes, I was holding forth at you for rather a long time there. It's honestly so funny to me that probably one of our longer episodes in recent memory is going to be us talking about soccer, not about complicated geopolitical and or political issues. But regardless, we're having fun. Everyone's going to listen to the very end of the episode. No one's going to be tired of us. We like really need some sort of like coordinated approach here, right? Now I'll note that there's like no one way to do this right. Like for example, I mentioned, Germany has those like national development centers in addition to like the club development system. The UK doesn't have that kind of thing, right? They just rely on the fact that they have so many clubs to do the youth development for them, right? And we could argue about which of German football or English football has been more successful in recent years, or just historically speaking. But the long story short is there are different ways that one could handle this, right? Like it doesn't have to be one like coordinated thing from the USSF that would like, take over the development of youth soccer in the United States, right? Like we don't need that level of like micromanaging or like command economy for soccer, right? I don't know. I can't remember the name of like the Red Army Sports Club or whatever you mentioned.
It is the Red Army Sports Club.
Right? We don't quite need that, but we do need some degree of a change, right? Like we need to allow more people, like more kids, right, who could potentially develop into like high caliber athletes, high caliber soccer players to be able to do so. And so the first thing that we really need to do away with is that pay-to-play system. Like, I think that, even like the coaching problems, even the like weird structure of MLS, even the lack of promotion and relegation, like the United States is still doing okay, right? Like we've got players who play for like top European clubs, who are like important members of sides that are in the Champions League. Sorry for definitions here. Side means team. Champions League is the league that is like between different European leagues, where like the top performers in the top leagues then play each other for like a continental title, basically.
Distinct from the Championship League, which is the second from the top.
Yes, exactly.
In England.
Ted Lasso made a joke about this as well, right? There's the Championship and then the Premier League and then the Champions League. It's all very confusing. Think of it at least a tiny bit like the Super Bowl, right? Where like you've got teams from different divisions, different leagues, right? The AFL, the AFC and NFC, right? Like different conferences playing each other. The American League plays the National League in the World Series. It's a little bit like that, but not exactly. Like you can think of, I'm tired. I'm tired of explaining this to an American audience. Go look it up. I'm so sorry. We're just gonna get derailed. Even with the like lackluster player development system that we have here, the United States still does manage to produce a number of good high caliber soccer players, right? Playing for good teams in the Champions League, winning trophies in the domestic leagues, right? Like the United States soccer player pool is arguably the best that it has ever been right now.
Can I ask you a question? And as this, I don't want to derail this. It might. Our women's soccer is so much better. Are they not operating in the same environment?
It's a great question. We should have prefaced this an hour ago that we're mostly talking about the men's game here.
Yeah. I just started thinking about it. Our women's team is outstanding.
The reason that our women's team is so good is because of Title IX. Because we fund women's athletics in the United States, and most countries around the world don't.
Okay, so really it's a matter of like, we have a women's soccer team to compensate for having a men's American football team. And so, but we're not spending the same amount of money or doing the same things to promote men's soccer.
Yeah, meanwhile...
So male soccer players should be mad at male football players.
Yeah, meanwhile, most other countries, even the ones that have good women's soccer teams, like have only really started investing into women's soccer quite recently, right? Like the United States has been investing in women's soccer for a lot longer than the rest of the world has been investing.
So all of these little like development centers, local development centers in all these other countries, that's for little boys who want to play soccer. It's not for little girls.
Historically, yes, right? Like there are now more of these development centers that cater to to women, or I guess I should say girls, right at that age, right? But historically, that's not been the case, right?
Okay, all right, cool. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I didn't want to get us completely off track. Of course.
So remember how Jules, Keira Knightley's character, is saying, I want to go play over in America. They have a whole professional league and all. We don't have any of that here.
Yeah.
And that movie came out in like 2003, right? Even
but this was still like I remember she's watching a tape of Mia Hamm in that.
Exactly, right?
So like this is
Yeah. Even as of like just a couple decades ago, there basically wasn't like top flight women's soccer leagues most places in the world. And so like women just didn't really play soccer in the kind of like
Ask me if I've ever seen Bend It Like Beckham. I can't say Santa Clara without saying it Santa Clara.
Now you did the British accent. Now I get to put my hands over my face.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I don't usually do it. Living there really obliterated my ability to do an accent on command.
That's tough. But there's levels to this game, innit? Anyway, that's the answer to that question, basically, is because of Title IX, the United States invested way more into women's athletics than basically anywhere else in the world. And that's why the United States is really good at soccer in the women's game, why we have, like, I think 4 World Cups. as compared to in the men's game where we have none, right? Where we've never even made a pass.
It isn't much more complicated than dump money into it.
Like part of it, yeah. I mean, I would say that like the rest of the world is catching up to the United States women's team, right? Like we just lost 2-1 against Brazil like the other week, right? Last week. And like that's not something that anyone would bat an eye at in the men's game, right? But like, and it's not something that anyone bats an eye at with regards to the women's game these days. But like, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, like the United States was just like creaming everyone they went up against, right? They were like, we were far and away the best team, right? But anyway, that's sort of the reason there, right? Like we've invested lots of money into women's athletics. Women were able to play soccer for free, right? There wasn't this sort of like pay to play system for women necessarily. And the kind of development that you got in women's athletics in school was still better than the like basically no development that you got in women's athletics in most other places, right? But anyway, back to the sort of like main point that I'm trying to make here of like ending pay to play. We've got a pretty decent caliber of players, right? But if you look into their backgrounds, like most of them come from at least middle class or otherwise fairly affluent backgrounds, right? Which is not necessarily the case for like the best players in other parts of the world, right? Or the best players, just like who have come from other countries to play in the best leagues in Europe, so on and so forth, right? Like there really isn't much of a path for a kid who's really good at soccer at a young age, but comes from a poorer family to be developed into a high caliber soccer player, unless they happen to luck into getting on the radar of one of those 30 MLS clubs. And so that really limits our ability to like get players from basically like half or more of like the socioeconomic ladder, right? They are far more likely to end up in other sports or just to end up not athletes entirely, right? And so that's, I think, like the biggest thing that needs to be fixed here. There are any number of ways you could go about doing this, right? You could provide scholarships through the USSF. You could get an eccentric billionaire to spend $100 million on putting together a fund for that kind of thing. You could institute promotion and relegation so that the soccer teams that are currently not operating in MLS have an incentive to create their own development academies, right? You could do this in any sort of number of different ways, right? But you really do need to end this like pay to play system where everything is about, how much money you can spend on the club team. And also importantly, though we didn't mention this in the front half, like all about winning from a very young age, right? The player development that happens in these academies in Europe is not often always about winning, right? At the youngest ages. It's about developing them as players, right? And so we need to have that sort of change in mentality as well. The second thing that I think could help here is, in fact, that kind of Ministry of Sport, a department of communications and sports or something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
This is not actually that uncommon around the world, right?
No, culture and sport or whatever. Yeah, it's the Ministry of Soft Power.
Yeah, like even in our like peer nations, the ones that are like most culturally similar to us, most of them have some sort of like ministry or directorate or secretary of culture and sports. Australia has one. They have a federal minister for sport. The United Kingdom has one, the Parliamentary Undersecretary of State for Sport. Canada has one, Secretary of State, parentheses, Sport. South Africa has one, Ireland has one, France has one, like Argentina has one. Lots of places have a ministry or a department of culture and sport. The Ministry of Soft Power, basically, right? As Megan said. This is like a normal thing that countries have. But in the United States, we have this idea, right? I think it's a correct idea mostly that like you don't direct and or like legislate culture, right? And I think that that's one of the reasons that we haven't developed something like this. But I do think that some sort of like actually making like the development of a good US soccer team an actual national priority like is something that we could do fairly easily.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we've got the President's Council on Physical Fitness, which doesn't do anything but make elementary school kids feel bad. Like, let's do something that might actually be productive.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's a degree here of like just like the inspirational value of a like really good soccer team doing well on the world stage that would probably frankly do more, honestly, like genuinely honestly, than anything.
I remember so vividly the women's soccer team winning the World Cup, and I think it was 1999. And it was so cool and so inspiring and so exciting. So, like I completely agree that it's a massive deal and a massive boost for the country and a massive boost just, for it snowballs on itself. It gets kids interested in athletics. If we're really, I keep hearing this kind of, fear mongering about kids only wanting to play on their devices. And, there are many, many things that come along with youth sports that are not just being a soccer phenom and winning the World Cup for your country. It's also a lot of good character development and social skill development and physical development as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't play soccer as a kid because I thought that I was going to go pro. I did it because it was fun, right? I did it because it was a game that I could play with my friends, right? And, like, yeah, for some people, it becomes their career because they realize they're really good at it. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really good at it, right? And so, like, you're not going to get the people who will realize it's their career unless you have the people who, like, do it because it's fun. Right. Mm-hmm. And frankly, like the United States doing really well in a World Cup would probably do more for physical fitness among America's youth than anything the President's Council on Physical Fitness has ever done. Like the real point here, and we don't need to belabor this point too much, is that like there is value in someone from the state. Again, as political scientists, we want to talk at least a little bit about the state. Someone from the state saying, we are going to make this a national priority, right? And like, yeah, there are other things that are more important than making soccer a national priority, right? But it would cost us almost nothing to do this, to have some group of people who are able to actually make this some sort of national priority and like developing the game of soccer here in the United States long term, rather than focusing, as quite frankly, the United States Soccer Federation seems to have done thus far, on just commercializing the game as much as possible and making money off of it. Right, like the $500 million that they asked San Diego FC to fork over. I guess this is MLS, not USSF, but like both of them sort of, working in tandem, right? Like commercializing the game, making it a profitable enterprise more so than actually growing the game long term. Because a youth development center, setting that thing up isn't immediately profitable. Right? It's a pure cost center for its first however many years, right? It's only later, once you finally develop that that kid that makes the first team, right? That makes the pitch and does really well, and then you sell to Atletico Madrid for $15 million, that the youth center finally repays itself in dividends, right? But you don't get that from teams that have no possibility of making it to MLS, no possibility of having their players recognized by like wealthier European clubs, right? No amount of commercializing the existing base of soccer fans in the United States is going to get you to the level of value that you could have long term by developing soccer as a more popular sport here in the United States. It would be way, way more valuable long term to do something like that as opposed to what we're doing right now, which is like all about short-term profit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that short-term profit idea is also what keeps us away from embracing promotion and relegation. It's the idea that you're going to lose revenue from, merchandise sales or ticket sales or whatever if you get relegated. That's a potential risk. And I know you gave us those statistics about you gain more from promotion than you would lose from relegation. But I would also like to say, I don't know if you've been to a minor league sports event recently. I went to a Coachella Firebirds hockey game, and it was so much fun. I go to one NHL game a year. It's a thing I do with my dad, and we had at least as much fun at that AHL game as we have at several NHL games. It was really entertaining.
I used to go to Rancho Cucamonga Quakes games quite regularly, living out in the Inland Empire. They're a single A baseball team.
I was going to say, that sounds familiar. Did they play in the same league as the Salem Volcanoes?
Possibly. But I had a great time at all of the Quakes games that I went to. Not sure who they're affiliated with these days. It's either the Dodgers or the Angels, I think. But yeah, like it's great fun to go to these minor league sporting events, right?
Oh my God, it's so good.
And I think that like the fact that these minor league teams in other sports are like totally a thing that exists and that people go to indicates that like the structure of promotion and relegation like would absolutely work in the United States for soccer, right? Like you're not going to have like, you know, a 60,000 person stadium, right, for every single one of those teams, right? In the same way that you don't for minor league baseball, right? Or for like minor league hockey or like the NBA G League, right? But people go to these games. People have fun there. There's still like revenue to be made in those spaces, right? And it works around the world, right? And quite frankly, the United States has enough people and is rich enough that it can support multiple sports leagues, right?
At the same time that we're saying, oh my God, it's getting so expensive. It's not a family thing to take, you know, you can't take 3 kids to a baseball game anymore. Baseball may be the one sport where you can really do it because there's so many games, but you can't take a family to an NFL game. Having that lower tier keeps the sport accessible too.
It absolutely keeps the sport accessible. Yeah. And I mean, like maybe this is a segue into just like directly saying like, let's embrace promotion and relegation, which is sort of the third thing on my list here of like, you know, in order to develop the game, you simply need to have the possibility that a team from, you know, like Schenectady, New York could manage to make it all the way up to Major League Soccer. A team from Rochester could make it to Major League Soccer. A team from Fresno.
What's with the upstate twist today?
I just feel like places in upstate New York are like the most like not places. You know what I mean?
They're like, compellingly named.
Yeah, like they're compellingly like not
Syracuse, right? Oneida.
Yeah, Ithaca, right? Albany, right? Like some team from Nashua, New Hampshire, making it up to MLS, right? This is the kind of thing that happens in European leagues, right? Like you've got teams who are like just hanging out in Sicily, teams that are like in Corsica, teams that are like from the far north of England, right?
Right. Have I told you about my dad's part ownership stake in the Caledonian Braves?
The Caledonian Braves. Caledonia is in Scotland, right?
Yep.
Your dad owns part of a Scottish soccer team.
They advertise themselves as a wee Scottish football club. He owns 2 shares.
A wee Scottish football club, eh?
We got them for his birthday.
That's so funny. What do you know what tier of Scottish soccer they are in?
The 5th one.
The 5th tier of Scottish soccer. Wow. Okay.
They're in the Lowland Scotland Soccer League, I think, or football league.
Very funny to me. And also, you know, I don't know if your father harbors any illusions of that team making its way up the Scottish league system, but the fact that MLS has that single entity structure means that you couldn't purchase shares in an MLS team for your father if you wanted to. So it's not just our eccentric rich people that are buying teams in Europe. It's our eccentric middle class people who are buying shares in European teams.
I feel like this entire episode was a setup for that joke. Good job.
Look, when you see the punchline hanging there in front of you, you gotta run through it, man. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
But anyway, sort of back focusing up on promotion and relegation, right? Like the economic case is there for it, right? Like teams are supported enough to make like the higher divisions of European soccer from places that are quite frankly very small by American standards, right? Wrexham, as we said, 7th largest city in Wales. Like last year in the English Premier League, there was Ipswich Town, who were in the Premier League for the first time in a long time, from Ipswich.
Ipswich.
Their sponsor actually was Ed Sheeran's like his version of his Eras tour, like the plus minus multiply divide tour. I don't know exactly what he called the whole thing, but that was their shirt sponsor, right? This year, one of the teams they got relegated, unfortunately, the Wolverhampton Wanderers from Wolverhampton in the UK. Very teeny tiny little places sometimes, right? And like this is the kind of like beauty of European soccer, is like a big, like huge team from like North London, like Arsenal, right? Or one of the Manchester Giants, Manchester United or Manchester City, or AC Milan, Barcelona, Real Madrid. They find themselves going to some small town in like the West Midlands.
Wolverhampton.
Right? Yeah, they find them go. They find
Chelsea playing in Ipswich. I love it.
They find themselves going to Wolverhampton. They find themselves going to Luton. They find themselves like going out to, potentially, if they get promoted to the Premier League, North Wales and Wrexham, right? Like, you don't have that kind of thing really here in the United States. Like, the smallest town I think that hosts an American sports team is the Green Bay Packers, right? In Green Bay, Wisconsin.
That sounds right, yeah.
Even then, right, there's like a certain magic, a certain like reputation that Lambeau Field in Green Bay has, right? Despite being in a town of, I think it's like what? Like 20,000, 30,000 people, somewhere along those lines.
106,000 residents, actually.
In the city or in the metro area?
The city.
Okay, so they're a little bit larger than I thought. But
yeah. Well, now it was population Buffalo, New York.
It's got to be more than 106,000. They're like 200,000.
Yes, it is. It's like 275,000. So it's. I mean, Green Bay. I think it seems smaller than it is, possibly, but it looms large in the football imagination.
Yeah, and like other cities that are smaller now that like that still have teams like Buffalo, right? Like were larger, right? Like when teams were placed there in the first place, right? And you don't really have the kind of like you just don't have like the how do I put this? Like it really is sort of like just a magical connection to the sport of like having some team whose home stadium holds like 70,000 people going to like Ipswich Town, whose stadium holds, like 25,000, or out to like in the cup competitions, like the FA Cup they have in the United Kingdom, where you'll have like a team from the Premier League playing a team from like the fourth tier of English soccer, like heading out to like Stoke-on-Trent, right? Like there's just a certain like majesty to that kind of cup football, that kind of night, which even that like does exist a little bit here in the United States with the US Open Cup, where teams play across leagues and across divisions. But it
sounds like Mystery Alaska.
It could be so much better. It really could. It could be so much better. It could be this kind of league like they have in other really successful footballing nations, where there is this kind of like deep-seated personal connection that people have to teams, which only exists among like very dedicated supporter bases in soccer in the United States, right? Like, I don't know if you saw the images of people watching the Knicks game in the streets of New York last night with the TV propped up on the big cans of tomato sauce, and like
I did not.
And like
That's
everybody
great.
sitting around in couches in the middle of the street, right? Like a truly like actually kind of beautiful image, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of like connection to the sport doesn't really exist in soccer in the United States.
No,
right?
I mean, I lived in New Orleans when they won the Super Bowl, and that's the vibe that gives off, is just like it's almost a spiritual experience.
And like there is, a degree to which like all of the stuff that we're talking here isn't going to be able to magically produce that, right? But the things we're talking about can get us closer, right? Like I have spent my entire life as someone whose favorite sport is soccer, and having to deal with the fact that it is almost nobody else's favorite sport, right? And so really this episode has just been one big therapy session for me, where I get to vent about how I want people to have the same kind of connection to soccer that they have to other big American sports. And I want to be able to look my European friends in the face and say, ha, we won the World Cup within my lifetime. Like, that is what I want. I want soccer in the United States to be that kind of spiritual experience. And we're just not going to get there if we keep doing what we're doing right now. Soccer is a different game than the other sports we have in the United States. It's played differently around the world. The most important kinds of competitions around the world are simply of a different league of popularity, skill, caliber, whatever you want to call it, than the most important competitions you have here in the United States for each of our individual leagues, right? I don't think that like the MLS title is ever going to reach the level of like the Super Bowl, right? But you could have, in my lifetime, an American team winning the World Cup. That is the goal, and that's what we need to change the way we do things in order to achieve.
Okay.
But until we do those things, until we take my therapy session, broadcast to the world, and turn it into actionable insights, actionable changes, actual real-world shifts in how we view the game of soccer in the United States, and maybe we can use this World Cup as a springboard to do that. Until we do those things, I have been Clayton Becker.
I have been Megan Cox.
And we will see you guys on the next one. And hopefully it won't be quite too heavy.